Most people compare Quarteira with Vilamoura. I don't. Because the moment you compare those two markets purely on prestige, I think you've already started with the wrong question. Quarteira isn't trying to be Vilamoura. It's solving a completely different investment problem, and that's exactly why I've come to think it's one of the most interesting markets in the Golden Triangle. Whenever people compare Quarteira with Vilamoura, Vale do Lobo or Quinta do Lago, the conversation usually revolves around prestige. Which area is more exclusive? Which commands higher prices? Which has the stronger international reputation? They are perfectly reasonable questions, but they quietly assume every market is trying to achieve the same thing. I've never been convinced that's true. The more time I've spent looking at these markets, the more I've realized they are solving very different problems for very different buyers. Each occupies its own position within the Golden Triangle. Each attracts a different mix of people, and each behaves differently as market conditions change. Once you start looking at them through that lens, comparing Quarteira purely on prestige begins to feel like comparing two businesses that happen to operate in the same industry but serve completely different customers. So perhaps the more useful question isn't whether Quarteira is better than its neighbors. It's what investment problem Quarteira is actually solving. For me, the answer has always been market breadth. One thing I've noticed over the years is just how many different reasons people have for buying in Quarteira. You might have a Portuguese family looking for a permanent home, an international couple searching for a second residence, someone planning their retirement in Portugal, a professional relocating to the Algarve, a holiday home buyer, or an investor focused primarily on rental income. At first glance, those buyers don't seem to have much in common, but I've gradually come to think that they are all contributing to the same thing. They are creating multiple independent sources of demand. And that's important because markets tend to become more resilient when they aren't relying on just one type of buyer. If one group becomes less active, another often continues buying for completely different reasons. I've often thought Quarteira is judged by comparison instead of by purpose. People ask why it isn't more like Vilamoura, or why it doesn't have the exclusivity of Quinta do Lago. But markets aren't trying to become each other. They are solving different investment problems. Imagine a market where most demand comes from one very specific group of buyers. If confidence within that group weakens, transaction volumes can slow surprisingly quickly. Not because the properties have become less attractive, simply because the number of people willing or able to buy has become much smaller. That's one of the reasons Quarteira has always struck me as unusually resilient. Its buyers have different budgets, different motivations, and different time horizons. So they don't all react to changing market conditions in the same way. That diversity doesn't eliminate risk. No market can do that. But it does reduce dependence on a single investment story. The same idea helps explain why Quarteira has such a strong liquidity profile. Now, that doesn't mean every property sells quickly. No market works like that. What matters is that the pool of potential buyers remains unusually broad across different price points and different types of property. I've always thought liquidity is less about speed than flexibility. If your circumstances change in 5 or 10 years' time, you are typically relying on a much larger group of potential buyers than you would be in a highly specialized luxury market. That's what liquidity really gives you. Not certainty, options. Of course, none of this automatically makes Quarteira the best investment in the Golden Triangle. Every market involves trade-offs. Quarteira doesn't offer the scarcity of Quinta do Lago. It doesn't have the luxury positioning of Vale do Lobo. And it doesn't have the carefully master-planned environment that makes Vilamoura so distinctive. Those are all genuine strengths. They are simply solving different investment problems. Quarteira's advantage has never been exclusivity. It's breadth. And breadth creates resilience in a very different way from scarcity. Perhaps that's why Quarteira is so often misunderstood. People tend to judge it by what it isn't, rather than by what it is. It isn't trying to become the Algarve's most prestigious market. Its strength comes from something much quieter. A broad buyer base, strong liquidity, and a market that's supported by many different types of demand, rather than depending heavily on just one. That won't suit every investor, but for the right buyer, it can be an exceptionally attractive combination. In a previous episode, I ranked the 4 major markets of the Golden Triangle by liquidity, and Quarteira came out on top. Not because it's the most prestigious or the most expensive, but because it has one of the broadest and most resilient buyer pools in the region. This is the thinking behind that conclusion. In the next episode, we'll look at a market built on a very different investment thesis: Vilamoura. At first glance, that comparison seems obvious, but I've often thought the real difference isn't prestige, it's structure. Vilamoura occupies a unique position between accessibility and exclusivity, and that balance creates a very different type of market from Quarteira. Understanding why those two markets behave differently may be one of the most useful perspectives you can have before investing anywhere in the Golden Triangle. So I'll leave you with one final thought. When you invest in a property, are you really investing in the address or in the market that surrounds it?